Hello, Martin. How you doing?
Hey, Steve, how are you? Thanks for having me. This is amazing.
Yeah, thanks for being on here. So this is a perfect timing in part because we're about to go to the Utah Rockwell Blast. And that was your first win. I think that was your first event and first win on the PLDA Tour, yeah?
Well, it's been a crazy time back in the days because that was in 2021 and I couldn't get to the US for a long time, for 1.5 years. And that's been my first event. I finally made it over and well, I won it. So it's a very emotional thing for me actually going back to Utah because I love everything about it. Not only the win, I love the grid, I love the tee bogs. I also, the most important bit was actually coming back to all the amazing people that I didn't see for almost 2 years.
Yeah, that's a long time to be away. So what do you remember like most vividly? Is there something that stands out, a particular drive or?
The red barn. The red barn in the background, like in the back of the grid. That's amazing. It's a perfect spot for me to aim at and then try to hit that little cut into the grid. Everybody's got a little bit of a different approach there, but I absolutely love the look of the grid. And also, I was so full of adrenaline. My first set that I hit, I still remember it, with those top flight balls, I hit 231 ball speed. I never hit 231 with these competition balls before. So, and then the next set, by the way, my driver broke. So it was a little bit too much for that little miss. But it's been, I mean, that's been amazing. I still see the numbers. I took a photo of it. Obviously, it like spun 1800, launched 13.2, and it turned out to be like 439 yards or something. I beat the boys by like 40 yards. And that's the only reason for that is obviously I prepared for it, but people underestimate what adrenaline actually can do. It's been probably 10 miles an hour of adrenaline that actually got me there.
That's awesome. Yeah, you hear in a lot of other sports the significant improvement that you get. There's not a whole lot of talk in, I guess, golf or long drive. Maybe just not enough studies yet. But yeah, if you're funneling it right, that adrenaline really can give you a lot of speed.
So actually getting that amount of speed by improved mechanics or speed training would take years. With adrenaline, you just have it all of a sudden. I mean, obviously you need decent mechanics too, but this adrenaline, and I mean, I'm still trying to find a way to emulate that like every single time, but the more comfortable you get actually hitting out at that grid, less adrenaline you actually have. So I always try to find a way to get back to that point and amp myself up as much as possible, drink energy drinks when I'm practicing and all of that stuff, but it's weird. I haven't really figured it out yet, and I think all of us, every single one, has still a long way to go to find out the nitty-gritty of this.
I think so. I think we're all very competitive by nature. We're probably very similar in that way. And there's no way to simulate getting up against somebody that you want to beat and actually doing that, because you can take all the energy drinks you want, but you're never going to have that same drive to go and crush that person standing next to you. I remember you and I were down with Bryson and a few other people at the One Stop Power Shop. And you know, that adrenaline, the amping up, I don't know how to simulate that. I don't think you can, especially for people like us that are so competitive.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I mean, well, maybe in the future we'll find a way to do this. I don't know if it's a certain routine to find a certain flow or whatever, so your body actually reacts differently to that. But I'm not there yet. I try over and over again. I try different angles, but for me, still competition is the only way to go.
And I mean, I know you use your foresight a lot, and a lot of people use different launch monitors, but that is one good way to try to, because at least then like you hit a ball really good. Oh, that was 220. Okay, that was 221. Oh, that was only 215. So you can really measure it and you can train with that versus just going to test on game day and see what it is. How important is that for you?
It is the most important bit because by feel, I can't tell. That 231 ball felt the same as a 218 on another day. You can't really tell until you see that number. And sometimes I'm super surprised both ways. So on some days I feel super fast and the number is not that big, and the opposite. It's crazy. And then at the same time, what's crazy as well is distances vary so much. It's not only the conditions, it's also the golf balls, how that particular golf ball reacts, then like obviously gusts of wind in terms of conditions and all of that. So yes, working on these numbers on the launch monitor is a very basis to actually be successful in long drive, in my opinion. But then seeing what kind of launch, what kind of number actually turns out to be which distance is the next step. because I'm super surprised sometimes in competition when I see a certain number and I see like, oh wow, my 209 miss hit just went as far as the 221.
Yeah.
Right? Because it got a certain kick, it hit a different spot in the grid. Sometimes it's the ball. You can't really tell. Sometimes these numbers trick you.
It is really weird. And I'm sure a lot of people could talk about reducing spin or increasing spin or whatever is right for those conditions. But staying on the topic of that Utah event, I remember I won my set. I think I hit the longest ball of the day at that point in the preliminary rounds. And it was like off the toe, not great. But it was just perfect for those conditions, I guess.
Yeah.
And it rolled out and, it ended up going 4 or something. But it was, then I crushed a ball and it was 20 yards short of it. And it's so weird.
Yeah.
How that works.
And wherever we go, like for example, the last event in Connecticut was such a patchy grid, and obviously you wanted to hit it at this one spot down the right side. But then from time to time, a ball that was sort of middle and bounced left was longer. And it's like, it's so random sometimes that without the actual camera angle of the grid, you can't really tell what happened down there. So what I hope down the road, especially now after COVID and with PLDA basically saving the sport, I believe we deserve to get back to that point to actually have a proper production of a long drive event, just like in the old days with World Long Drive, because there in the TV rounds you could actually see how that ball bounced, what it did it check, did it get a big kick or whatever, and then you just get a different feedback for your shots, and then you can adapt.
Yeah, that's really valuable information, and I think we are getting there. I don't want to say anything yet, but I know there's stuff in the works that I think will satisfy a lot of people in that way. Let's jump back though, because it seemed like in 2019 you had a great year, and going into that year. So I want to know, first of all, in the year and a half, 2 years that you had off with the pandemic and everything, but before that, going back, what did you do to get ready and improve yourself by so much going into 2019?
Oh, that got a lot into that. Actually, that's now 3 years ago already, which is totally crazy. So I don't know how many people actually know about my background. I've never been a professional athlete before or a golfer. So I played golf as a junior when I was 9 years old. I picked up my first club. And then as a junior, the system in Germany is a little different compared to the US. It's not connected to the school whatsoever. It's just your private life, the sports you do. And I picked golf, which was super crazy back in the days, especially in Germany. No one played golf, obviously, right? So I did fairly well in Germany, but then when I turned 15, 16, I kind of stopped at my first motorcycle, girlfriend, all the good stuff, and was not that interested in golf anymore. And it's not the sexiest thing to do either, right? Especially in Germany, when you start drinking and all that stuff, right? Because when you turn 16, it's party time in Germany. I can tell you that. And then, I stopped for quite some time and went the usual route, right, that I was supposed to go. So I did my bachelor's degree, master's degree, worked in a big enterprise for 8 years. I sold a large IT infrastructure projects and, had a desk job, basically. Not only a desk job, I was traveling throughout all of Germany selling these IT projects. And
excuse me for a second. I want to tell you real quick about my favorite training aid and a sponsor of the podcast, the Lag Shot. It's designed with what they call lag flex technology that'll help you to create and maintain more lag in your swing, which will give you better consistency and more speed, which we all want, right? But my favorite part is that you can go out and actually hit balls with it. It's a real club. They make a driver, a 7-iron, and a wedge. So you can incorporate it into your practice sessions to ingrain the better technique that it's teaching you. Once you try it, you'll see why I love it. Go to lagshotgolf.com/crush or click the link in the description below to get 15% off. lagshotgolf.com/crush.
Well, at some point, one of my clients played golf, and I was like, all right. So I give it another shot, and after 8 years, I kind of tried golf again, and then went from there, played my first long drive event, and there's been a lot of steps in between, but stuff you don't want to know, and you're not interested in, but but I can tell you that. I figured, okay, I love this stuff. I love long drive. I love hitting the ball far. I want to know everything about it. And then I scraped all of YouTube, all the whole internet, everything I could find to educate myself on what needs to be done to hit the ball as far as possible. there was not a lot of information back in the days. Now there's way more, but back in the days there was almost nothing. There was a couple of videos from Joe Miller and like Jason Zuback and all of that, but it was not very, I mean, I knew more, but couldn't really make use of it. And when you see all these educational videos, you don't really know what to apply first and so on and so forth. So I reached out to Lee Cox, who's been, well, the only guy in Europe basically during that time that taught long drive and knew about long drive because he taught Joe Miller. And well, it took me like 8 weeks roughly to get a response from him through email, because I reached out like, hey, I hit it 400 rods on a regular basis. I want to have a lesson, right? But he's got like probably 100 people saying that every single day. And well, then finally I got the lesson. I went to England, to London to get that lesson. And well, I learned everything from the very basics of long drive to the point that I am at now. So it's been a long way, but all the preparation that I did for 2019 to get back to that is actually learn about the swing, learn about long drive, what is different between golf and long drive, what does it take to hit the ball as far as possible, how can you adapt to different conditions and all of that, and how do you actually practice for it? That's also a different story, right? So
the practice is really big. Because so far a lot of these podcast episodes have involved physical training to some extent, and that's a huge part, going into the gym and getting yourself ready. But you need to balance that, and certain people, of course, have different ratios of what they need here or there. But you have to hit a lot of balls with an intent to hit it as far as possible. There's no way to substitute that.
I agree. I totally agree. And when people ask me what's the split like, I'm like, it's around 80-20 for me in importance, right? It's 80% hitting balls, 20% preparing your body to actually handle that stuff and get stronger. And well, then I started whacking golf balls, learning about the numbers, seeing the numbers, and well, improve on the numbers, basically. And while I was doing all that, I was in constant contact with Lee to improve my mechanics. So, and then basically in 2018, I played my first season on the European Long Drivers Tour back in the days. And I won, in total, I think I won 5 events that year and won the Order of Merit eventually. Wow. And that got me that confidence to actually try to compete in the US. Right, because it's still that way, but it's been even more extreme back in the days. So the U.S., obviously, it's a U.S. sport, is super dominant in long drive, and Europe is like a small chunk that is also doing long drive, but not really that competitive. But yeah, I tried, and then during that World Long Drive season, I made 3 TV rounds, which was crazy during that time. I came second in Rochester, which has been my best event, and from there it got me the confidence and also the first couple sponsorships to actually try and do this as my full-time job.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me is how, because I think you posted, I don't know, probably months ago, one of your early swings when you were just getting started versus now. And and of course, like you're more, developed for the sport, and you've obviously gotten a ton of reps in, but some of the intangibles as far as the tempo and the fluidity of your swing, it looks like a polished swing now. Like you've obviously done it a lot, but it looked at first like you were really kind of straining and learning how to move the club efficiently, and you've developed that very well. As you mentioned, going over 230 miles an hour, you have to, really know how to move the club.
Yeah.
So has that been mostly a technical portion, like working with Lee, or trial and error? How have you done that?
It's a mixture. So one big thing for me was always backswing length, because I looked more like John Rahm than John Daly in the very beginning when I started off. And obviously hand path length, and the longer you can swing back, the more potential you have for speed. So you don't see a lot of long drivers with actual short swings. I mean, Troy Teal is probably the only exception out there. And most long drivers have long swings. So I had to get there. And for me, it's been a mix of, in the very beginning, doing flexibility stuff, turning into that position over and over again in the backswing up to the point that it's been an automatic. And then it got less important. So it was very important to me up to that point that I got there and did it over and over and over again. So I just got more flexible and had more range of motion in my backswing. And it became permanent as well. So that's been one of the points. And in the very beginning, when you saw me do that swing there in Tunisia, it was when I just started off doing this with a 48-inch driver, it was a forced backswing. I had to work really hard to get there, right? And I did that for a long, long time until, well, it became permanent. And now it's just, I don't even think about it anymore. It's an automatic. And that's been one of the biggest chunks for me.
Yeah, it obviously shows. And for a lot of people, I think it carries over into different aspects, but you need to get some kind of a baseline, whether it's a baseline flexibility, a certain amount of strength, whatever it is, and then you can really refine things and go off of there. But let's get a little bit more into the details of what you did in 2020 and the first half of 2021 going into your first PLDA event.
Oh, God, that was a terrible time, actually, because in 2020, as everybody knows, right, it's not been a good year for every single one of us. And I just quit my job, my full-time, very well-paid job. And
so, not to interrupt, but you were working all in 2019 and then going back and forth for the WLD events?
No. So yes and no, because at the same time in 2019, I already started my side jobs with a bunch of different things. Like I started to host the European Long Drive Games. I started doing club fittings. I started doing a bit of coaching and all of that. On my actual job, I was on a sabbatical.
Okay.
So I took a year off that's not been paid and tried to actually do this full time and see if it turns out to be a positive when I go back and forth to the US, right? So I tried to do everything as cheap as possible, cheapest hotels, cheapest flights, everything planned out so I can actually travel on a budget and do all of this on a budget. And then in 2020, as it turned out well, and I got my first couple sponsorships, I was like, okay, let's give it a shot, right? I mean, I basically cut my salary in third, if not less, right, during that time, but I took the risk to do it. And because I had this baseline going, and then like 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after I quit my job, COVID hit. It's been 2 weeks. It's been absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, this can't be true, because in the very beginning, nobody knew what's going to happen, right? So when I heard back in the days, it was Donald Trump announcing that the borders are going to shut on that Friday, and it was Wednesday that day, I was like, okay, I'm going to book a flight tomorrow morning to get to the U.S. and to actually be in the U.S. because at that point in time, I thought, okay, that season is going to happen, but well, the U.S. guys are just going to play with in their country, just doing their stuff, like having a world championship and all that, right? Because in the very beginning, it didn't seem like the U.S. was that much affected, and you try to keep the virus out, right? It was a time when nobody knew what is actually going to happen that night. Right, it was that crazy. So I flew out and I had a couple events. I had a photo shoot with Callaway planned. I had the Endless Summer Invitational during that time planned. I had a bunch of different things planned in the next couple of weeks. But during that flight, I was flying to Charlotte actually, because it was like the quickest and first flight I could get just to get to the US. I went to Charlotte, and during that flight, like 90% of the stuff that I had planned was already canceled.
Oh, no.
So I was in Charlotte and I was like, what am I supposed to do now? Right? It's like, it was that crazy. So I decided to fly down to Miami to see Bobby Bradley because I was in contact with him as well. And then that day, the 231.9 for me happened, right? I had a 231.9 ball in that sim, and it was an amazing day in that manner, but I had to find a way what to do. And as everything was canceled, I was scared to actually not be able to fly back to Germany. So I took the next flight to Toronto, then to Amsterdam, and then to Munich to actually go back. So I was in the US for like 36 hours or so and hit a 232 ball, basically. It was like the craziest thing ever. But then the cool part that happened was, I was very fortunate because in 2019 I was casted for a TV show that is called The Mole. It's been on TV in the US as well, with the US guys. And the German version of it aired in April, May, June. Then it's been 8 episodes that I was a part of. And eventually I won that show. So I took a bunch of money with me from Argentina. Basically, that's where we shot the show, which gave me a nice baseline to actually be able to do this full time. So, and to grow the sport as well, to help everybody doing this, and actually dedicate my whole life growing long drive. That's been my mission during that time. And so it's not been that devastating for me financially that I had to find a job immediately to get back to something. But I could utilize all of 2020 for me to grow all my other businesses and improve my golf swing, right? And prepare for the 2020, that was 2020, for the 2021 season. And then I didn't compete for 1.5 years. And then I got back, and the first event was Utah. So it's been a crazy time, and it takes a lot of explanation throughout all this stuff. But eventually, it's so in essence, it's been a rough time. We pushed through it. I've been working on the right things during that time, which got me the advantage when I got over here to actually be able to compete. And then it's been another avenue that happened when Bryson announced that he's going to compete in the World Championship.
Mm-hmm. So from the time you hit the 231.9 down at Bobby Bradley's to then going 231 in Utah, were you sustaining that kind of speed, or are there peaks and valleys in your performance like that?
Oh, definitely. There's been a lot of valleys and a lot of peaks. So I hit a couple of 231 balls in practice, or when I was competing in like hitting exhibitions in Germany, all with top flights as well. Yes, there's been a couple, but there's been days when I was max 218 too. So it's not like or people are the fastest every single day. You got to have your rest periods. You got to have, for me at least, you got to have different types of sessions, right? So sometimes I'm working on something mechanically, right? Whatever, it might be my hand path that I want to try to get out more or whatnot. And on some days it turns out to be maxed out at 218, and on other days when I try to work on mechanics, all of a sudden I hit like 227 and I don't even feel like it. It's that random, and I truly believe it's something more than CNS. I know that when the central nervous system is not ready to fire, you're slow. When it's ready to fire, you're a lot faster, right? So it makes your muscles contract faster, but there's more to it. And I don't really know, I can't really tell you how CNS recovery really works, because sometimes it's definitely not, I can't definitely feel it. So on some days I feel amazing and like super awake, ready to roll, and I'm slow. And on other days I didn't get a good night's sleep, I'm super sore, and all of a sudden I'm breaking records. It's that crazy. And I don't really know how to explain it, but I have a feeling there's more to it. There's something that we haven't figured out yet.
There are definitely things that we have not figured out. The mind can do incredible things, and who knows? When we can tap into it, that'll be great. But until then, we just got to, trial and error and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But there was, not to sound like too, like weird and out there, but there was one time I was training down at the One Stop Power Shop with Kyle, and so he was trying to go for a certain speed that day. I think it was 230. He was in some kind of a program like to get ready for an event. And it was kind of a frustrating practice for him. He was not getting the speeds he want. And I was sitting like, right behind him into the side. And I was like trying to like not meditate, but like put myself in his shoes and be like, all right, put myself in his own like place and say, okay, what is he feeling? What is he thinking? And there was one swing, like, again, this is going to sound kooky and weird. I know that, but like, I felt like I was almost like in his mind, like there was some kind of connection, and then he hit the 230 or 231 or whatever it was. And then, he dropped back down a little bit, but like, there's something weird about what the mind can do or can't do. So
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, look. When I hit the 231.9 with Bobby Bradley, I hit it after he went live on Instagram. And I mean, there's something to that too, right? Nothing changed in the room. Absolutely nothing. When you're competing, nothing changes, but the cameras are turned on. It's actually the same situation, but in your mind, your body didn't change, but your mind changed. Something changed, and it makes your body react differently. And that's so crazy about it. And that's what I try to figure out to emulate every single time. And my next question would be, how sustainable is it to emulate it all the time, right? Because when you're in some sort of fight or flight mode and you're fighting, right, because you want to get that number, for how long and how many times can you do that until you're done forever? I don't know if there's a limit. I don't think anyone has tried doing that with their buddies or figured out how to do that, right? But I mean, till now everybody's still alive and we're good, but there's something to it. I agree.
Yeah, it makes you kind of wonder for like guys on the PGA Tour that are out there every single week playing, what's it like for them, where they have thousands of people following, millions of people watching, and it's every week, again and again and again and again. Is that a net so like, to your point, is it like a CNS fight or flight kind of thing where you would get drained after that? Or is it different where it's almost like uplifting you? You're like almost like more of a what's the right word? Like a communal organism that it's kind of gathering its resources rather than one person who's just tapping out everything.
Maybe. I mean, comparing golf to long drive it's a little different because you're not trying to, hit the highest ball speed or have your body work the fastest possible, but actually the most consistent possible and stay the calmest possible, right? So you're fighting that thing in a different way. And it's that also what impresses me so much with Bryson actually being able to do both, right? Because it's the same stuff that hits him, but he's using it in a different way, if that makes sense. So I agree. There's a lot we can't tell. We don't even, we don't see gas in the air, right? We can't see oxygen and all that stuff. So we can't see Wi-Fi, but yet we're talking, right? We can't feel Wi-Fi. So there's some stuff happening definitely around us that does something, but we don't know what it is. And maybe it's a different type of energy. And then you go 230. I have no idea, but I want to find out.
Yeah, so do I. So let's get into something a little more concrete. Okay.
Yeah.
That's, I like those topics. But for people who just want to start long drive, what do you think people should be aware of? What do you think they should do as far as a process of getting involved?
Wow. So that's a long topic because when you just want to try long drive, come out and compete. It's that simple. So just try to, when you enjoy hitting the driver, get yourself a longer one, right? Because right now you're probably hitting 45.5 or 46 inches. Go get 48 inches and try to move that thing. It's so much fun. It's different. It takes a little bit of time sometimes for some people to be able to handle the new length, but then eventually you will be faster. And you'll see how much fun it is hitting 6 balls in a row, hitting 6 balls in 2 minutes 30 seconds. The adrenaline rush for the first time ever. You'll be shaking and you'll be having a hard time actually teeing up the ball and all that stuff. And that's amazing. And you gotta figure out if that's something you love. And then as soon as you're like, all right, I want to do this, and you you envision yourself being a professional athlete and doing this professionally rather than just competing for fun, doing it as a hobby and being an amateur long driver. And you really envision and you see all these guys out there like Kyle, like myself, who else, like Josh Koch, Justin James, Ryan Gregnall, all these guys doing this as a full-time job. I know Ryan Gregnall isn't, but the other guys are. Figure out a way to get there without putting too much pressure on you to make money week one. So that would be my recommendation. Don't make the mistake and quit your job day one when you did well at the first event.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's just no need, even if you do win and you place well in all of your first, few events, it's not like there is a long drive event every single week of the year. So you can still, hopefully your job is somewhat flexible. Like I do personal training. I was doing it more full time back in the beginning. Thankfully, when I started long drive, I did well, pretty quickly. I started getting checks at most events. And so it was more like, oh, well, I'll allocate more resources here, maybe do a little bit less training, do, whatever it is, charity events, things like that. But there's usually no need to completely jump out of your day job to get in. You can still be a really, really top competitor.
Absolutely. And I didn't even touch charity events because in Europe, that's just not a thing, right? When I would go to a top-notch charity event in Germany, I would probably raise like $500 a day because when people donate $10, they already feel like they're super generous. So it's just a different mentality, right? It's just different. But when you're in the US, take advantage of that too. And at the same time, when you're hitting at charity events, I mean, at least you're hitting all day. Right? But the hardest part is probably for these guys in the very beginning to actually get events when your name is not out there yet. Right. But then talk to guys like Steve. Like there's a lot of veterans in the sport that are very willing to help you. So don't hesitate to reach out to these guys. But all I'm saying is the very, very baseline to actually be successful at this and make it somewhat sustainable is to think and plan out your revenue streams as soon as you plan doing this.
So speaking of that, how is your YouTube channel going? It looks like you're putting out a lot of really good content. So first of all, let me recommend to people, if you want to learn more about the golf swing and long drive, Martin, you're putting out a lot of great stuff that'll definitely help people. But how has your journey been there?
Oh, it's been, I got a head start to be very honest here, because as soon as I got on board with Regecy last year, which is my content creation group with Bryson and Hogan Molson and a bunch of other guys that just joined, I got a head start because they taught me so much about how YouTube works, right? Because it's a little bit different compared to Instagram. Every platform got its own rules a little bit. And basically, what I do on every single one of the platforms is just document what I do and basically play a little bit of golf here and there, do some entertaining stuff here and there, obviously, because I find it fun myself, and it's still the best way to get as many eyeballs as possible. The best example, by the way, is the Long Drivers page. Bobby Bradley did an amazing job there to get as many eyeballs as possible to our sport by posting a lot of different stuff. You can check it out yourself. But he knows how it's done. But yeah, YouTube is, for me, it's amazing because I can just talk longer, and as you can tell on this podcast, I love to talk about this stuff, talk longer about all of these topics. And I know that most of my videos are still way too much talking head most of the time, but I don't mind, whatever, right? I'm still improving on this, and I still try to figure out how YouTube actually works and what converts the best. But for me, it's just bringing out as much valuable content as possible, and I'm not holding back, so I don't feel like there's any secrets in the sport or whatsoever. So when you give away all this stuff and people figure it out, they deserve it, right? Yeah. If they listen to all of this and they do well and beat me, whoa, it is what it is, right? It's growing the sport, and the more competitive people there are, the more people will follow and get better. Right. So but it's going great. I mean, I right now, I don't really know my subscriber number, but I think I broke 20K a couple weeks ago, and it's growing every single day. And I got some interesting videos coming out now, actually playing golf, because I figured most people just want to see long drivers play golf. And I'm not a big time golfer, just like Ryan Riesbeck, but yeah, that's just a reference to Art Sellinger saying Ryan Riesbeck is not a big time golfer. Tennessee event when he beat me in 2019, then Art Sellinger was like, yeah, Ryan Riesbeck, he's not a big time golfer. The only reason he could hit it that far is the shaft, right? And he beat me by like 10 yards or so. It's been fun. But it's still cool to display what's actually possible when you're doing long drive out on course, what's reachable, what kind of different irons we can hit, and also what it does to the golf game in general.
Yeah, that is one thing that's fun to watch, fun to do. And there are certain challenges that come along with it as well. When you're hitting it that far, the possibility for sideways really goes up, and it just makes for enjoyable stuff. Unless you really need to post a good score, then it's a challenge.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it's always this. I got to decide if I want to make it entertaining and hit driver on almost every hole, or if I want to score well. Because when I want to score well, I would probably not even hit driver, maybe once around, right? Otherwise, it would be like hybrids and 6-irons off the tee or whatnot to play the best score. But that's not very entertaining. So I just love to bomb it out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody likes that. So let's talk a little bit about the physical training side. Obviously, you work out. What kind of stuff are you doing now, and has that changed over the last couple of years?
It has changed a little bit, but as I was playing basketball before I got into long drive, the very basics that I still stick to are pretty much the same. So it's mostly explosive movements. It's not a lot of reps. It's compound exercises, very basic exercises, plus a little bit of specific stuff here and there that is a little bit more rotationally. But basically what I try to do is cover all the muscles in my body. The number one question that I get is like, what's the most important exercise? And I always respond like, yeah, it's all of them. But if you have to decide and prioritize, I would go by deadlifts, pull-ups, squats, shoulder press, and something explosive, either jumps, sprints, mat ball throws, slams, stuff like that, right? If you had to prioritize. But what I try to do is cover all the different angles of my body and just stick to a maximum of 8 reps, better 5 reps, as explosive as possible, and cycle it in a way that I try to work out before I'm hitting, when it's more of a priming workout that is 50-60% intensity. When I try to go all out, I always try to hit first and then go all out, because I always try to prioritize the hitting, and I try to benefit from the lifting and not fatigue my hitting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that is where, once you get to a certain level, like I said earlier, and if you're already a good long driver, I think that's exactly how you should do it. There probably are some people, like I've worked with a lot of different junior golfers, and they desperately need to bring up their just baseline strength. They're way too weak in certain things. So maybe for them, eat more food and lift heavier, and maybe prioritize that a little bit, because they're like, a lot of them are just junior golfers. They play high school golf. Maybe they're trying to play college golf or something like that, and they weigh almost nothing, and they're just a small framed person at that point, and they need to get bigger. So going out and hitting and pushing like your max speed, of course that's important, but it's always a priority thing, and what's going to give you the quickest benefit. So I like the way you're doing it. I think that's great for most long drivers.
But also, there's the opposite out there. There's people there that should lose a lot of weight and actually get going. Actually, I mean, for a lot of people, the correct response would be just get started.
That's right.
Do something. So people ask me if I do my kettlebell swings with like 24, 28 kilograms, and they've never seen a gym from the inside. Dude, it's not the priority. Just get going. Just move it, right?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is really common. So I'm glad you said that, because most people, they fall into two camps a lot of times, right? People who are really committed and they're already into it. They're already doing something, and maybe that's misdirected. So then talking to you, listening to the podcast, whatever, that can help them. And then there's the whole other group of people that just haven't done anything, and they need to just get started. So a lot of times people will ask me for a workout plan or a diet plan or whatever, and I'll say, like, just start. Just like go do some body weight squats, do some push-ups, go for a walk or a run if you're capable of it. Find some food groups that you know you shouldn't be eating and cut those food groups out. But you don't need to go and like have this specific, okay, here's my macro plan. On my workout, I'm going to do 80% for 5 sets of 3, and just do something. If you're just moving around, you're going to be a healthier person. You're going to be a better athlete if you're not doing anything now.
I agree. It's the same with long drive, by the way. They asked me about my shafts and like loft setups and all of that, and I've never swung a long drive club. It's like, just get going. You'll figure it out. Everybody's different. There's no perfect out there, by the way. There's no perfect workout. There's only a perfect workout for you, and you're always adapting. So just get going. Swing a golf club when you want to get into long drive as hard as possible. Go to the gym and eat less crap. That's the perfect advice for most people out there.
It is, for sure. And at the end of the day, you should, and you will, if you're working on it, you'll know your body the best. So if it's a feeling in the golf swing, or if it's a certain exercise or exercise plan, you'll find out for yourself what's best. You just got to give it that time, and you got to try different things. Because even now, if you look at the top long drive guys, you mentioned equipment. Some people, like Colton, a lot of times he'll hit a 190 CPM shaft. So for people who don't know, that's like a noodle. That's super flexy. Although actually, so they should check out the podcast with Jason Hordesky, who makes all the kinetic shafts, because that was fascinating. He was saying how basically, like if you call it a 190 CPM, you think it's a noodle, but the more you flex it, the stiffer it gets, like exponentially quickly. So it's not as like whippy as some people would think. But that was a side note. So you'll find some people who are really fast, really good, who use a 190 CPM. And then you'll find some people, I think Justin James, maybe he could correct me if I'm wrong, but he's probably using like a 280 CPM shaft. And
he's hitting everything. That's so impressive, actually. He's got these, like, you would probably call it a 4 or 5x shaft, right? I don't like talking about flexes, but it's, most relatable. But you were talking about CPM. CPM is cycles per minute, which is basically a number that shows how flexible your shaft is. It's like an engine of a car, right? You're talking about horsepower. If I would talk in flexes, I would say like, my engine is super strong, is medium strong, is sufficiently strong, whatever, right? And when you talk in horsepower, it's actually comparable to the CPM. It's just way more accurate. And you're right. It's individual.
Yeah, everybody's got to go try it. Let's talk for a minute though about flywheel training.
Oh yeah.
Do you still use those, and how do you use them, I guess I should say?
I do. I do. I don't have them with me because right now I'm in Dallas. For the summer, I live in Dallas, and I didn't take my gear with me. But it's just a different type of training. And with that, I basically, especially it's been during a time, I got those during a time when I just became a dad last year, which was 1.5 years ago. My son is 18 months in the meanwhile. But I didn't have a lot of time. I didn't get a lot of sleep during that time. So it cut my workout time in half, if not less, because it's so intense. Have you tried it?
Oh yeah, I have them, and I love them. Like you're saying, it's different. I don't know the best way to describe it without actually trying it. So the first exercise I did on it was a deadlift on the K-Box. Yeah. And I was expecting kind of like a pulley machine, like, okay, this isn't very hard, and then, whoa, it pulls you down. It's so weird the way that, so they call it inertia training. But it feels like maybe momentum would be like another way because I think people could relate to momentum better than inertia. But it's like, however hard you put into it, it's going to pull you back a little bit harder. And it makes for amazing variety of your exercises. So if you're doing squats or, rows or pull downs or whatever it is, you can put on different size flywheels and it'll pull you either harder or less hard, and you can move faster or slower. But either way, you can put tons of force into it in a way where if you did it with a pulley machine, you'd probably break the pulley machine. And then you wouldn't get that same way of pulling you back, which I think really carries over to sport, in any sport, in a much better way, where like if you're playing basketball, and you know better than I, like if you're, transitioning really quick, to jump from one side to the other, you're eccentrically overloading that muscle, and then you have to change direction as quick as possible. And you don't get that same stimulus if you're just lifting a barbell or you're pulling on a pulley machine. But you do in any kind of sport, like in golf. Your rate of force development is incredibly important. So to go all the way into your backswing and then to change direction and be able to come down and create that speed as quickly as possible is invaluable.
I agree. And what was mind-blowing to me is that you're completely ignoring gravity. So this is not about gravity, it's about inertia, as you said, right? That's why astronauts actually utilize this method to stay fit in space. Because, when there's no gravity, you're not using your muscles, right? And eventually you're probably going to die, right? So they use this to actually stay somewhat fit in space. And that's been mind-blowing to me because it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're right before the Utah event. So what are you doing to kind of like peak? Because you said you had those peaks and valleys, right? Like everybody does. What are you doing to peak for that event?
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of prepping for it. So usually what I do, independent of the event, now Utah is special for me, but the preparation is exactly the same. So the week before the event, I try to emulate the actual event and the build up to it, and the week before. It's especially important when I'm prepping for the World Championship because we play 4 days in a row. and that's a different type of preparation because I want to get my body ready to peak on day 4, which is super hard because I'm supposed to be the fastest on day 4, but I'm probably the most rested on day 1, which is incredibly hard to actually time and not wear myself out on day 1, 2, and 3. Right, but still at the same time advance, right? So that's very, very tough. So this week is a little different to that, but still what I try to do is I do speed sessions. So I basically try to swing as hard as I can, right? 3 times a week right now, being monitored with a GC quad to see the ball speed numbers, and every single range is a little bit different. So driving ranges have different balls. So these different balls convert differently. So you better compare your speeds to the same type of ball because it can vary by up to 15 miles an hour. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And I like to go by ball speed and not by club head speed because, quality of strike is just so important in events. It doesn't matter how fast you swing the golf club. It's only your potential, right? And balls also spin differently. So I try to dial in these numbers as well. So in Salt Lake City, I try to basically spin it a little bit higher because we're so high altitude and I need a little bit more spin to keep the ball up in the air. And at the same time, I just visualize whenever I'm at the driving range to have that red barn in the background and try to pound balls at that red barn over and over and over again because my miss hit is left. So I overdraw it or hook it. That's my miss. The best thing that can happen to me is starting off with a slice or like with a miss hit right because that's so super easy for me to correct. I have a hard time when I start off a set with 2 duck hooks. Then it's tough to recover from that because I have to do stuff in my swing that is contradictory to building speed to get back to what I want to do to hitting a straight shot actually. So it's a mix in these sessions that I do of speed and then dialing in the numbers at the same time because when I just try to go as hard as I can in a certain session, I usually completely ignore the spin numbers just to push my body to be as fast as possible. But I usually end that session with some quality shots to just get a feel what a quality shot is, how I want to swing the golf club effortlessly. And sometimes I figure that that's usually a pretty good way to produce speed as well. So it's a mixture of a lot of things, but the most important bit besides the actual training and pushing the speed as hard as I can, plus dialing in the numbers, is figuring out the recover periods. So the rest periods are the most important bit. And for me right now, I've tried a couple different things. For me, I figured I'm the fastest and best and sharpest during the tournament when I do not hit 2 days prior to the event. So I'm not hitting 2 days prior. Some people hit the day before. Other people take 1 day off. Others take a whole week off. So this taper period that everybody does a little bit differently is, yet to find out for me as well what's actually perfect. But till now I went with 2 days most of the time, and that's pretty much been the best for me. How about you?
Let me go back first, because you mentioned you want to increase your spin, and that's counterintuitive to a lot of people because they want to decrease their spin in general.
Yeah.
But for you, when you want to increase it, are you changing the equipment? Are you changing your attack angle or something else? What are you doing?
So it depends. When I have usually when I just don't try to spin it low, I spin it in the low to mid 2000s. And if I need a little bit more spin that particular day and I can't get it up, I would usually just loft up a degree. Okay. That's what I did in Denver when I won this year, which was high altitude as well. I just lofted up by 1 degree. So instead of the -2 setting, I used the -1 setting. And then the spin's been fine. But usually when I try to spin it as low as possible, I usually do it by utilizing angle of attack. So I launch it high and spin it low. So I just try to attack it up as crazy as I can. And on quad, I got up to 17 once, which is like a practice method. It's not like usable in competition. High, but Colton Castro is probably a 20 when he wants.
That's for his low shot is a plus 20.
Low shot. Yeah, that's a stinger. Yeah. But actually practicing to attack the ball as high as possible, as much up as possible, is a good practice method for me to prime the high angle of attack for competition, because usually in competition, my angle of attack is a little bit lower. So that 17 feel in practice would then be a 10 to 12 in competition, usually. So that's one method of doing it. But then, as I said, my angle of attack sometimes it varies, or my normal varies during the competition. So during that day, I got to figure out, do I need a loft up or not? So it depends a little bit, because as you guys know out there, the golf swing is different every single day, and so is the long drive swing. Yeah, the details are always a little different. Sometimes you swing it well, sometimes you don't. And that's why every single week there's a different person at the top of the leaderboard, at least in golf.
Yeah, for sure. So you asked about my recovery. I'm still testing a lot of that. I had, going back a little bit, in 2019, I had a couple weird injuries that took like a year to kind of get back to where I could be doing like speed training and everything at the way that I wanted. So before that, I would take usually about 2 days off. Sometimes I would do something the day before, swinging easy, like just for hand-eye coordination. But I also come from like a lot of a golf background. So just kind of that moving and like playing, hitting wedge shots, whatever, I think helps me. Now I'm testing it where, like you said, I want on that fourth day, I want to be my best. And I would say based on like last week, I think it was my second or third day pushing really hard was my fastest. So I'm kind of like trending in the right direction, but I've tried all kinds of stuff like light therapy, ice baths, you name it, I've probably tried it. And to be honest, I don't really feel like a huge difference from any of those things. Some people say like, oh, they took 5 grams of creatine and they're all of a sudden like they're feeling awesome. I just don't really respond that way. So experimentation, I think, but general rest, yeah, for a day or two before. But like you said, everything feels a little bit different on competition day. So sometimes on the days that, even if you feel like you're a little depleted, if it's a competition day, sometimes those are the best.
It's so interesting because, I agree with the 5 grams of creatine, by the way, but the question is always what causes what? Has it really been the cause for this, or has it been, don't know, me going to the porta potty 10 minutes before I hit? I don't know. It's so random sometimes. Something causes it, but you can't really tell what it is. So there's no like true solution to this, I guess. But let's stick to 2 days. And interestingly, what you said with the hand-eye coordination with wedges or just chipping a little bit, pitching a little bit, I agree. Helps me a lot just to be more aware of my hands and the wrists and what are the wrists actually doing. And sometimes I actually try to, like the day before the event or 2 days before the event when I'm actually not hitting, I just try to hit wedge shots, like 50-yard wedge shots, but with long drive technique. So I try to hit up on the ball and like stuff that you would never do when you try to have a half decent wedge game, right? So when people watch me hit these at the driving range, they're like, "What is that guy doing?" He's hitting wedges, but he's actually not hitting wedges. It looks terrible, but it helps me to just get a feel for it, prime my CNS to do this motion, right? But I'm not really applying any speed to it because it's probably a 50-mile-an-hour swing, right?
Yeah,
and I agree with that. It's very interesting how you can prime the body actually to do things.
That probably looks terrible, but then they're like, oh, he's a long driver. He doesn't hit wedges.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, whatever.
Let's take one more kind of little dive into the mental side of things. We talked about like, I guess more like esoteric components of it, but like, do you have a routine that you follow on your shots? Do you do meditation leading up to events? What kind of, mental work do you do?
Yeah, I do have. I don't do meditation on a regular basis. I know a lot of people recommended me to do this, but I have a couple different trances on my phone that I utilize before I actually start the event. So when you see me wearing my AirPods at the driving range, usually I won't respond when you talk to me. I won't even realize because I got some stuff on there that gets me going and preps me for the event. So that's my initiator kind of to get into the competition mode and to find that flow and get into the zone or whatever. It doesn't work all the time, but most of the time it does. And what I've realized for my events when I'm hitting, the best case scenario for me is when I just don't care. When I just go out, tee up the ball, have fun for 2 minutes, 30 seconds, whack that golf shot, comment on every single one of those shots, and just have fun, right? That's what it's about. I've tried a couple different things and a couple of different moods during these sets, and I figured that's my most natural, and that's what I try to stick to every single time. And everybody's got a bit of a different approach. It's very personality driven, I believe, but for me, that's been the best. When I just hit golf balls at the driving range, have fun, and react to every single one of those shots.
Yeah, well, you're fun to watch in that regard for sure.
You're different.
Well, so I've experimented.
What is your approach?
I've experimented with different stuff as well, and I think that it's too easy for me to get like not angry at a tournament, but like kind of get like too much in my own like bubble of like, all right, this is my mission. I'm going to go out and I'm going to execute. Instead, I think I perform better. Like going back to high school or college days, I would probably play my best if I'm with a teammate and they're like, oh, I bet you can't hit, a shot around that tree or over that tree or whatever. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. And I do it. I'm having fun with it and I perform and stuff like that. That mindset, I've not been in the habit of having that at long drive events, but I think that's a big key for me going forward.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's pretty much so. I've been at my worst when I was afraid to hit a bad shot. That's like the worst state you can be in. Like, don't do this or don't do that or whatever. Like, that's the worst amount of preparation you can do, I believe. And, the more I just disconnect from all of that and just try to whack the golf ball, pick a target, and have my, 1-2 swing cues that I use all the time, right? Just for me, it's like steep takeaway. It's not steep when you look at it on video. It's like super flat. But I feel like it's like steep takeaway and then pull the trigger, basically. That's what works best for me. And I can tell you, as if you're having like actual swing thoughts, actual technique thoughts, or stuff that you're dealing with when you're at the tee box hitting into the grid, you haven't done your preparation. So all of that work has to be done before. If that's not done, you have very bad chances to actually do well.
Yeah, for sure. You just can't be. And I did a really interesting podcast with a sports psychologist who works with like PGA Tour players. And he was saying, if you're impact conscious, if you're thinking about what's going on at impact, you're going to do worse. Either you're going to be slower, you're not going to, actually get that impact that you're looking for. And so to your point, and what he would say is you could have a routine, like your thoughts, like, what you said, steep takeaway and explode. But if you're actually then consciously manipulating and doing and tweaking and stuff like that, it's going to kill your speed. It's going to kill your accuracy, and it's not going to be fun. That's for sure.
Yeah, and so the thought that I use is not a specific thought, right? It's like pull the trigger. It's not like move your left foot this way or whatever, right? So because I truly believe the body is capable of self-organizing at some point when you give your body the right input, and the less specific it is, the better. Right, so I have this one steep takeaway thing that I do to prime when I do my waggles and all of that stuff, but then it's just far away. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you about because you have like a pre-shot movement that you follow.
Yeah.
I would imagine that probably started as an orchestrated thing, but now it's got to be just a reaction.
That is interesting you say that. Yes, it is. So, I have a couple of things that I do before I hit. I pound my shaft off my chest and all that stuff, which just like 3-4 years ago when I played an event, I just did it for fun and I won that thing. And I was like, wow, okay, this works. So then I just kept doing it and it became a habit, kind of. And this, like the trigger move that I do, this waggle, you see that with a lot of long drivers. Everybody does it, but in a different way. So what you try to do is actually just load into your right side, into your trail side to actually get going before you take away the club. And everybody's got a different way. The most prominent was probably Kyle in, when was it, 2019, when he was rocking his feet, right? Which basically did the same thing. Now he got to a little bit of a different trigger move. And everybody's doing that. And my waggle, people always say like, hey, it reminds me of Matt Wolf. Like, whatever. I never had that in mind, but how it actually originated was when I was working on my ground reaction forces in my lead side, I try to feel the ground before I actually took away the club where I have to push. and just to prime my body to do that in practice. And that turned into the habit of doing this before I hit. And I'm not saying I'm gonna keep it forever. Maybe at some point I'll be working on something different during practice, and that becomes a habit. You never know. It's not something that's set in stone, but it's just a way for me to get into the rhythm of get going.
Yeah, it's hard to swing for me, and it seems like for you, if there's not some kind of trigger, if there's not emotion. Yeah. I remember like back when I was as young as whenever, when my dad was teaching me how to play golf, there was, I think it was like Sam Snead would do a certain thing with his right knee. And so that's what he taught me. Like, okay, you kind of kick your right knee in toward the target, and then you're going back the other way. It's got to be that, opposite reaction force to get it started. Yeah. And that would be, I guess, more good advice for people just starting. Like, keep kind of a fluid athletic motion. You shouldn't necessarily try to be rigid and following these certain positions.
Especially when you want to swing fast. So it's very tough to swing fast when you're not moving, when you're not following a movement pattern. So one exemption would probably be Landon Gentry. When I look at him, he's very still before he takes away the club, right? There's always outliers. Always. So, but people always, like, for one example would be when I talk about tempo. I'm like, when you try to improve your tempo, which is basically the ratio of your backswing to downswing, and most people strive to a 3-to-1 ratio. So that means when you swing the club back faster, you swing it down faster. So it's one of the easiest principles for most amateurs to increase their club head speed. Because when I tell people do that and they swing like, 90 miles an hour, all of a sudden the next swing is like 98, right? That kind of level. But when I say that, like, try this, people always come up with that one example that doesn't do it. Like, Matsuyama is not doing it. Yeah, you're right, but a lot of people do it, right? There's always outliers all the time, but you always find that, that shouldn't hold you back from trying the principle that works for most people.
Yeah, and it's also confusing in golf. I imagine it is in other sports, but I don't know. Where in golf, you could find an expert who would tell you one thing and an expert who would tell you the opposite. So like when talking about long drive, I always try to refer people to, people like you or Justin James or whoever who can do it and have done it and can carry over not only what they know intellectually, but what they know through experience, and they've actually felt it and they've actually done it, because that's a whole different thing when it comes to coaching. So.
I agree. I wouldn't go to a stack and tilt coach to, do long drive, right? It's different principles with different goals. And it's so interesting how different the golf world and the golf technique world is.
Yeah, it is. It makes for some heated debates. So
I agree.
All right, let me ask you a few just kind of like disconnected questions. Answer them as, short as you want or expound on it if you want. And some of them are going to be those frustrating questions like, what's the best? But I want to know for you, like if you're just, picking one, let's say for yourself, okay? Yeah. So what's your favorite exercise for long drive?
Swinging the golf club as hard as possible.
It's a good answer. Do you do weighted clubs and lighter clubs and stuff like that?
No, I do. Yes, I do. But if I had to pick one, it would only be hitting golf balls as hard as possible. Yeah. But I got the speed ball. I love doing impact drills with it, like hitting towels, hitting head covers, hitting something, overcome a collision, but as fast as possible. I do a bit of speed sticks as well. Every piece of equipment has its purpose. Yep. And nothing is perfect. The combination of training is perfect. But if you want me to pick one, I would just go out to the driving range and hit golf balls as fast as I can not every day, but a lot of times a week.
Okay. That's a different way to answer it, but I totally agree that everything has its place, and you build a better plan with all that. Next question is, what is your favorite drill for long drive?
Wow, there's so many. It depends on the golf swing, but being aware of what actually creates torque. So torque creates speed, and torque is, and now we're getting a little bit detailed here, is moment arm times force. So how is moment arm actually being created in the golf swing? Like realizing that, seeing what it does, and then training in a direction that makes sense is my favorite drill. So the actual drill is find out more about the golf swing itself and the long drive swing, and then pick the right drill. Because for me personally right now, it's a ground reaction force drill. It's isolating my left side. So actually, if this is my feet, right, standing a little bit like this, lift this up and just try to basically swing over my lead side to create as much ground reaction force as possible over my lead side. I do it with irons and drivers. That's my favorite drill right now because that's something I work on to point that force and the pressure in the right direction. But being aware of what is right for you and what you need to do is the most important drill, because a drill could be perfect for you, Steve, and could be terrible for me and put me in the absolute wrong place. So, that's why I'm like, in long drive, you got to figure out what's right for you and how you create your speed and what you need to do to get faster. Yeah.
Is the purpose of that drill for you, are you measuring your actual force that you're putting out on your left side and you're looking to increase that?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So also what I try to do is the vertical force output is one thing that I try to improve, but also the horizontal component of it. So when you think ground reaction forces, there's 3 different directions the force is pointing. So it's vertically, it's toe to heel, and it's left and right. Every system calls that a little differently, but that's pretty much what it looks like when you address the ball, right? That's how you can apply force. And then at the same time, you got to be aware what the difference is between pressure and force, right? Because the pressure is actually just the vertical component of it. And you got to be aware what causes what and what creates what in the golf swing for you. A lot of people might not be that technical, and they might be like, okay, when I feel this way, I just have more force output. Yes, I agree with you. That's perfect if you feel that way and you don't want to know about all the underlying stuff. But I've been that way in the very beginning. But then the deeper I was digging, the more I found out, and the more logical it was for me, the better I could actually apply it. And also realize I did this in the wrong direction now. I got to do more of this so it actually makes sense to create speed. So I know that it can be overwhelming in the very beginning, but the more you deal with it, the easier it gets, and the more you find out you don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And philosophers going back, I think Aristotle, yeah. The more I know, the less I know, essentially.
Very true.
So, next question, what's your go-to shot in competition?
A drut.
I don't know that one.
I'm being serious. It feels like a cut, but it turns out into a tight draw. It turns out to be a tight draw, yeah. So as I tend to overhook it, I just love the feel of a cut. And I just address the ball, feel cut, and it turns out to be a beautiful draw. That's starting right side of the grid, drawing back to the middle. That's my go-to shot, the drut.
I wonder if it feels like a bit of a cut because, if your angle of attack is so high and if you were to still swing in to out with that high angle of attack, it'd be really easy to have it hook over. So if you feel like you're hitting a cut, maybe it just...
Yeah, a couple of things. I improve on a couple of things when I just feel cut. Usually my rotation gets better. Also, on my whole hand work, my wrist work gets better because I don't over close it, yeah. And all that stuff. There's a lot of things actually happening because when I feel cut, I actually have to rotate better and I can't shut my face, right? It's just a weird feel, and to me, it feels like a cut. With irons, it is a cut. With drivers, it's not a cut.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a good feeling.
Yeah.
Well, we already talked about advice for starting off, so people go listen to that if you want advice on how to start. What is your motivation in long drive? Why do you want to compete? Why do you want to be the best? What's your why?
Well, the why is I want to be the best, but the actual why is I want to do what I love, because I fell in love with long drive. There's nothing, absolutely nothing that compares to hitting the perfect shot that day that goes forever. And the coolest part about it is you cannot buy it. It is impossible to buy. You can buy your entry fee and compete. Yes, you can. But there's no money in the world that can buy you a 450-yard shot. And you get what you deserve, you get what you've worked for, and that's the beauty of long drive.
Or the feeling of a 495? Is that what you went?
Well, maybe. I mean, Josh Koch had that feel.
But you went what, 494?
No. I went 484.
484. Okay.
Yeah. Josh Koch hit the longest drive of the tournament.
But I thought you were right there,
but I won the tournament, and so it's not always the longest ball of the day that wins the tournament. So that's another thing. Like the format of long drive, I'm not a big fan of double elimination. So I like the round robin format a lot better because it's just more plannable. You know when you're hitting, you know what to expect. And all that, and it's easier to follow. We have live scoring too, and all that stuff. But the beauty of like seeing your 200 point set, like that feel like walking off the tee box, knowing that you just scored 200 points, that you're on a good way to advance, then all the way up to the finals, competing against the best in the world, and then do well. You can be a billionaire. You won't get it. You will never experience it or feel it. Never.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't. We could probably take a really deep dive here into the format of an event, which we don't need to do necessarily, but you do bring up a good point, because I think if we adjust the points in the round robin or some different configuration, I think it could make for a slightly better outcome. So have you given that any particular thought? Like let's say instead of the winner getting 200 and then 150, 25, what if it was 300, 200, 150, where you're just closing the gap a little bit? Instead of doubling the guy behind you, you're getting 150%.
I never thought about it, to be honest.
Okay.
But that's interesting. I mean, you got to ask a couple of mathematicians what would be another fair or interesting way of doing this, and then you got to try. Because you'll never know until you try or you simulate it or whatever, but you don't really know how it's going to feel like when you're going through the rounds. Because right now, during the round robin, it's pretty clear that most of the time when you score 475, 500 points, you're advanced, right? So usually it's double win, you're in, double win and doing half decent again, you're in, and all that stuff. So it's a pretty... it's the normal format that everybody knows about, everybody's comfortable with, and the double elimination that we recently did just added a little more confusion to the game than anything, in my opinion. I don't really see the benefit of doing it. I don't know why it was changed, or we're experimenting with it. It's cool to experiment with different formats. I totally get it, but for me personally, I just prefer the plannable round robin, where you see when you hit all the time, you're playing against everybody at some point, and it has shown that it's the fairest way of doing this.
I think in the two instances that I know of this year that we did do the round or the double elimination, it was for a time constraint because more people had gotten into the event. That to do the round robin for everybody would have, I think, needed a second day at the venue, and obviously a lot of expenses, and maybe the venue wasn't available the second day. But I think the plan is to be doing the round robin points format.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, last time in Connecticut, we were done at 5 o'clock. So we could have easily, we had a double elimination with 24 guys, and we could have easily done 2 rounds of 12. Like we did in the round before. The time wouldn't have made a huge difference, maybe like a 30-minute or 1 hour difference, but it doesn't make a big difference if we were finished at 5 o'clock or 6, right? I personally believe, but I've run events myself in Europe, and I know how tough it is to please everybody. The facility, the players, the sponsors, everybody, I totally get it. And I've never really complained about it. I just want to find out why. And I just want to be in the best spot to prepare for an event, because my preparation for a double elimination would be a little bit different compared to the round robin if we would do it, for example, at the World Championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that's the plan there, but one thing that's really cool, I think, about the PLDA and what they're doing is that people like Bobby and Ryan, they know the sport really well.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not going to just all of a sudden get a curveball, or you're going to get people that won't actually listen to you. So they do take feedback, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I agree. and they've been the only reason we're still alive, we're still hitting.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So it's been a disaster in 2020 when Golf Channel all of a sudden announced that they're gonna put World Long Drive on hold, right? Whatever that means, because technically it's still on hold, right? Mm-hmm. And we're holding for quite some time here. So thanks to the whole team.
It's a long hold.
Oh, it's a long hold. Thanks to the whole team to actually provide us a platform to be able to compete, because it's just so much fun.
Mm-hmm. For sure. We got a little sidetracked there. I got one more question. That's, what's your favorite moment in your long drive career?
Oh, wow. Oh, there's been a lot of moments, but my favorite probably has been when I won my first set on TV in 2019. So it's just been one shot. It's been the last shot of my set against Tim Berg, a two-time world champion. And on that last ball, I beat him. And
where was that?
That was in Rochester.
Okay.
And after the set, Tim was like, "Yeah, you were celebrating like a world champion." And I was like, "Yeah, that's how I felt." Right? I felt like world champion at that point because it's been my first win, and it's been a great start to the rest of my career. And I will always remember that thrill and that moment and that impact and all these people celebrating with me, and rewatching that on Instagram over and over again, because it's just been such a great kickoff for the rest of my long drive career.
Awesome. Very cool. So lastly, what's next for you? You got a lot of filming going on. So other than, prepping for Worlds and for Utah, what do you got coming up?
I mean, my days right now are usually a mix of practice, working out, and editing stuff. That's pretty much it. And planning out what I want to do next, what I want to show next, because the biggest chunk right now for me is doing social media work that I make most of my money with, and I try to provide the most value for people out there, right? And that's my part of growing the game. At least I see it as my part of growing the game, helping people to get an entry point, get a starting point, get tips to get better, and also transfer a little bit of that to the world of golf, right? Making golfers faster. And then to be honest with you, I mean, I try to be the best I can. I'm working as hard as I can to do the best I can at these events. But I have, today is, what day is today? Today is August 20th. I'll be back in Germany in 1.5 months after the World Championship to basically, I got a couple things to do back home in Germany. I got my indoor studio that I have to redo with 3D and ground reaction force plates and all that stuff. So I got a lot of stuff coming up, and it's just so interesting because whatever I do, social media, doing coaching, doing working on my own swing, whatever I do, I just learn so much every single day about a lot of different things, how social media works, how the golf swing works, and all that, and all of it somewhat revolves around the topic of golf. And that's my passion. That's what I love to do. And I'm just grateful to be able to do that. And I just appreciate every day.
Let me ask one more question, though, because you reminded me, and I forgot to ask it earlier. But as far as your personal development, if you were to pick one category for your long drive career, if it's a technical thing or a mental thing or physical thing, what do you see as your biggest area of improvement going forward?
It's all areas. I mean, there's no area for me that is perfect yet, and I don't think there will ever be an area that is perfect. If you don't consistently keep working on your golf swing, it's gonna get worse. If you stop working out, you're gonna get weaker. If you stop mentally preparing, you're gonna get mentally weaker. So whatever it is, you can't just stop. But if you're talking about potentials, it's still the golf swing, which is 80% of what I do, in my opinion. 80% of my long drive game is mechanics, and that's what I consistently try to work on. And actually getting that more consistently out there, right? Finding a way to get more consistent ball striking, hitting it straighter, hitting more of the shots that I want to hit, being more versatile, being like just the best I can out there at the grid is the golf swing. And that's where I see the biggest potential, by the way, for most people. I have not seen a perfect golf swing yet or a perfect long drive swing. I don't think that exists.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We'll see some good ones here coming up, though.
Oh, a lot of good ones.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So where do you want people to follow you, and what kind of stuff are you going to be putting out leading up these next few weeks?
All right, so I got a couple golf matches and also some instructional stuff coming up on my YouTube. So my YouTube channel is Martin Borgmeier. All of my handles are actually Martin Borgmeier, which is interesting because I just recently started doing TikTok. And I just had a couple of viral videos there, and I just hit the 40K mark yesterday, I guess. So I hit 40K followers. And also on Instagram, I'm posting a bunch of stuff on a regular basis, posting stories every day, insights of my practice and training routine. So I appreciate everybody following. And also what I try to do every day, by the way, it's part of my job, I try to respond to every single one of the DMs. It's a lot of work. It takes like 30 minutes to an hour of my days. But whenever I'm waiting for something or whatever I do and I have a bit of time on the side, I just try to respond to everybody. And well, because I appreciate all you guys following along and actually making my social media what it is.
Very cool. So in a week, I will see you in Utah. Now that I know all your secrets, it's going to be a good match. And thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Steve, aim at the barn. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one.
Will do. Thanks, man.